Good afternoon. Welcome to the Faculty and Staff Assembly. Today's weather seems not very good, but I think that is life. Just like in the world we're living, somewhere seems more safe, but some countries suffer from the warfare or some injustice. So we know that there are many refugees around the world. Today, we're so happy to invite Helen to share more about that. Let me introduce a bit more on Helen. Helen is the head of the sub-office Hong Kong of UNHCR. UNHCR, that means the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, the UN Refugee Agency. So Helen has a very good background. Helen has the extensive experience working on refugee protections issues in Hong Kong, Jordan, and Tanzania in the humanitarian and legal sector. He has a bachelor in Hong Kong U and also a master at the Oxford U, so a very good exposure. Today's topic is talking about the latest overview of refugees around the world. Before we start, I would like to remind a couple of things. First of all, this Zoom will be recording and we want to post it on the social media later. The second, we have a Q&A sections after Helen's sharing. So if you think of any question on these issues, please mark down, and after Helen's sharing, we would like to invite you to share your questions and we have a good sharing after the sections. So let's pass the mic to Helen and let us give her a big hand. Helen, please.
Hi, everyone. First of all, just wanted to really thank you so much for inviting me here today to be able to share about this topic on the global refugee situation. Just really excited to be able to speak more about it and really looking forward to your questions or if we have any discussion towards the end. You'll see on the screen. So before I get started, actually, I would like to play a very short 5-minute video. This video is called What They Took With Them. And it's a video that was created by UNHCR, so the UN Refugee Agency that I work for a few years ago. And before I go into further details about this, I'd like to invite you to kind of just step back and put yourself into the shoes of those who are seeking asylum or refuge and think about what it is that they can take with them, or more so, what is it that they might have to leave behind, right? So let's watch this video together first.
Wallet.
Empty.
Wallet.
Wallet. Money.
Coins.
Pennies. Torch. Whistle. Laser pointer.
Seen more clearly out at sea. 3 bags.
1 bag.
Rucksack.
Trunk.
Yellow plastic bag for papers, sellotape till waterproof.
And yellow cards for refugees. And national ID.
Army service record.
And an information booklet from the government.
Diploma, electronics.
Certificate from high school.
Passport, if you've got one, you can take.
Expensive one-way ticket.
Fake.
Flag.
Flag.
National flag.
Flash drive, laptop, phone.
Mobile.
Phone number, phone number, phone number.
SIM card.
Spare one.
Phone.
Phone.
Smartphone with Skype and FaceTime.
Headphones.
Charger.
Charger.
Overseas adapter.
House keys. House keys. House keys.
We have suffered so much. I want to study so that I can become someone again.
Painkillers.
Painkillers.
Seasickness tablets.
Walking stick.
Walking stick.
White cane.
Crutches.
Wheelchair.
Syringes to use in emergency.
Bandages.
Bandages, toiletries, toothpaste. Toothbrush and toothpaste.
Nail clipper comb.
Shampoo and hair gel.
Barber equipment.
And sunscreen.
An ointment for sunburn.
Tablets for son's epilepsy. 1 every day.
And all vaccinations recorded to date for the baby.
And face whitening cream. I want my skin to be white and my hair to be spiked. I don't want them to know I'm a refugee. What if somebody spots me and calls the police? Because I'm illegal. But not if I'm white. That's right, isn't it?
Traditional clothing.
Warm clothing.
Baby clothing.
Favorite clothing.
Dirty clothing.
Wet clothing.
Layered clothing.
Pants.
Pants.
Sewing machine. It's my life. It's my blood. 4 dresses.
Change of clothes.
One pair of flowery jeans that I wore to a party and won't wear again till I go to another one.
One shirt, and one missing sandal.
Pair of shoes.
Pair of shoes.
New, never worn.
A hijab. A gift from a friend.
My favorite scarf with the skulls on. I just love the color.
My turban. My turban's my guardian. Now it protects my identity and my faith. Without it, I'm vulnerable.
Headscarf from someone who died in the conflict.
A hat for the baby.
And socks for the baby.
One nappy. Just one.
And sanitary towels.
Sports jacket for warmth.
And some have a life jacket too.
And some don't.
The most painful thing about being a refugee is that you wake up one day to find you've lost all of your liberty and can no longer decide on your life. It's like everything is closed in your face. So there's nothing else but the sea. There's nothing but the sea as a way to get out and be free.
Cigarettes.
Carton.
Packet. Lighters.
Say pipe.
Ginseng.
Jerrycan.
Milk.
Sterile water.
Bottled water.
Water everywhere.
A half-litre bottle for a one-week trip.
Bottled oil.
Lemons.
Lemons.
Dates.
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 Dates. Biscuits.
Crackers. Crackers.
Crackers.
Corned beef in a tin.
Tea set for the others on the boat. We're thirsty, tired, and afraid. I'll make some tea. That's what we do. We make a family.
Baby food.
Marshmallows.
Bread that wasn't fully baked. The man who threw us out wouldn't let us finish up.
Metal cooking pot to make some dinner for the children.
One man only brought a cup.
I'd have been ashamed to ask every day for a cup just to take a drink of water. People get tired of being asked for things all the time, and eventually they will say no. Now, I have my own cup. It gives me independence, no matter where I go.
Plastic carpets.
Rug.
Pillow.
Animal skin tent.
A piece of mortar from the house.
Piece of soil from the garden wrapped in fabric.
Sacred soil.
Sacred books.
Sacred texts.
Rosary and prayer beads.
Rosary.
Prayer beads.
Rosary.
My headdress hides the key to a small metal chest containing all of the essentials for a wedding.
Ring.
Ring.
Charm.
Ring.
Mother's wedding ring. I lost mine in the bombing, so my mother gave me hers.
My earrings. I make jewelry. All the jewelry of my people. It symbolizes freedom. No one tells me what to wear.
Heart necklace.
Heart necklace.
Virgin Mary necklace.
Bracelet.
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 No, the bracelet's not my favorite thing. That's Nancy. She's my doll. The night we fled, my mother put her on my bed so we would not forget her.
But in all the rush, she did get left behind.
I don't mind. She'll keep watch.
Watch.
Digital.
And analog.
Family portrait.
Photos.
Photos.
Photo of my father.
Memories of my father.
I have nothing from my home. Everything was broken in the struggle. We were out in just 10 minutes. They destroyed the house around my sickbed. The neighbors heard me shout and came and carried me out.
I carried both my children in baskets, swinging from a pole across my shoulders.
And I carried my virginity. Out at sea, we rubbed ourselves in vomit so the pirates wouldn't touch us.
I escaped with my children.
Sister.
Brother.
Husband.
Wife.
With my soul.
With my smile.
With my life.
As you can see in this video, it narrates the stories of so many refugees around the world, right? And the kind of the sentiment behind that, regardless of where you are fleeing from or who you are or what the circumstances around it, you leave behind so much, right? There was a research, a global survey conducted with a lot of different refugees around the world, and we asked them, what do you miss the most or what do you want the most? And the overwhelming response across repeatedly, every single refugee that we asked, it's always, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home. So it's this concept behind that. It's never a choice for them to leave their home to go somewhere else, right? They have no other choice but to leave, risking everything, including their life behind that, all the risk and uncertainty of what's to come after that. And in the video that you've seen, we've seen different images, whether someone is fleeing by foot or by land, by sea, or by plane. Is never an easy journey. Geographically, it could be very far away, but also emotionally, there's a lot of trauma behind what comes behind when someone seeks asylum that, you know, deserves our understanding and compassion. So as you can see here, refugees are a very diverse group of population around the world, right? It comes with the recognition that everyone has the right to seek safety, whoever, wherever, and whenever. Towards the end of the video, you might have seen a statistic that says that there are 65 million forcibly displaced persons around the world. But that video was made a few years ago. And actually just this week, UNHCR has released the latest statistic, and there is 100 million forcibly displaced persons around the world. So, you know, that number has gone up, especially and including with the crisis in Ukraine that we've seen. And behind this number, you know, there are individuals, children, families, each with their own story and trauma of why and how they have had to seek safety. So yeah, next slide, please. And so if just to go back a little bit in terms of the history of, you know, how refugee protection came about, on the left, you see a picture of a lot of world leaders at that time back in 1951. So this was in the context of after World War II. These leaders came together and, you know, in that context, it was a lot of communist refugees, but they were thinking, you know, what do we do with this population and what can be done to protect their rights? So they've drafted what's now called the 1951 Refugee Convention that defines the legal definition of what it means to be a refugee, and also the rights that refugees have, that should have, and the legal obligation of states in providing protection for them. And what's in a core principle behind this Refugee Convention is a concept called non-refoulement. Refoulement is a French term, but basically what it means is that a person should not be returned to their home country if they face serious threats to their life or their freedom, right? In this convention, there are also a set of other rights that should be granted to refugees. For example, the right not to be punished for illegal entry into a territory. A lot of these times when someone flees, they might not have, you know, even have the time to find their passport or, you know, apply for a passport. They may not have the right travel documents, or when a lot of borders are closed, they might have to pay a lot of money or risk getting smugglers to smuggle them to another country just to seek safety, right? So it's important for us for them not to be punished for illegal entry, because everyone has the right to seek asylum in the country of asylum. There are also a broader set of rights. So for example, the right to work, the right to education, the right to housing, the right to for freedom of movement, to be able to move within their country of asylum, etc. So some countries in the world, they do have reservations or exceptions to some of these articles, but the Refugee Convention sets out these rights for countries to follow. And then in the right side, obviously, you see beautiful Geneva, city in Switzerland. And today still, which is where the Refugee Convention was signed back in 1951. But today still in Geneva, in the bottom right photo that you see is the headquarters of UNHCR. More than 70 years later, unfortunately, you know, the issue of forced displacement is still around us today. And currently, UNHCR works in more than 130 different countries around the world. Next slide, please. And so here you can see a map of all the countries in the world that are signatory, that has signed this 1951 Refugee Convention that I mentioned. And one thing that you might notice in this map is that unfortunately the Asia Pacific region is lagging behind in terms of refugee protection, right? So some of the countries that have yet to sign the convention, you can see in red here. So, you know, something for us to continue to advocate for and to think about. But, you know, also to note that this is not the only indicator of refugee protection. It could be that, you know, some countries might have their own national policies, even though they did not sign this international treaty, or it could be that even if a country has signed this convention, they might not be enforcing these laws in practice. But anyway, just to emphasize that Asia Pacific and is lacking in the convention. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to throw some statistics at you, but not to be concerned, because I'll walk you through these statistics. But I think it's important for us to look at these numbers, because a lot of times the media might be portraying the refugee situation in a slightly different way. And it's important for us to look at these facts and to debunk some of these myths, right? So these are the trends that were from mid-2021 last year. And so these numbers that I've mentioned because of the Ukraine crisis has grown since. But nevertheless, you can see here, as I mentioned, 100 million forcibly displaced person, and we have refugees. So refugees are those who are recognized to have refugee status, that they cannot be sent back to their home country. And then 4.4 million are asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are those that are undergoing the screening process in order for them to be recognized to be refugees that cannot be sent back. So it's a legal screening process that they all have to undergo. And next slide, please. And one thing I want to mention here is I circled around the internally displaced person category, because these are people that are displaced within their own country, versus a refugee is someone who has crossed an international border to another country, right? And what you will notice here is that the numbers for internally displaced persons are actually higher than refugees. So the reality is that a lot of people might not even have the resources or capacity to cross the international border, but they are still displaced within their own country because their home is not safe, right? So for example, in the Afghan situation last year, we've seen that when a lot of borders are closed, you might still see internally displaced people that have to flee. And it's very common for them to have to flee time and time again when there's multiple displacement, because, for example, when you're in a conflict situation and the security situation is very volatile, you might have to keep moving for your safety, or to find access to basic services or access to humanitarian aid. So yeah, just something for us to remember. Next slide, please. And here as well, you can see a map of the refugee hosting countries in the world. Again, so this was before the Ukraine crisis, but actually a majority of the refugees around the world come from 5 countries, and then now also Ukraine. But we see Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. And you can also see the corresponding countries. So for example, Turkey is currently the country with the largest number of refugees that they're hosting. And so Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, some of the neighboring countries around Syria are hosting a lot of the Syrian refugees. You see Colombia, which is neighboring Venezuela, hosting Venezuelan refugees. Pakistan is hosting a lot of Afghan refugees, not just recently from August last year, but for generations, Afghanistan has gone through decades of war, and Pakistan has always been a country that's been hosting refugees from Afghanistan, and then Uganda as well in hosting refugees from South Sudan. Next slide, please. And so you can see here, what you'll notice is that there are 2 trends. One is that actually a majority of refugees are hosted in developing countries rather than developed countries, right? So what you've seen just now is a majority of refugees actually flee to their neighboring countries, versus sometimes in the media, we might hear a lot about, say, the refugee crisis in Europe. This was before Ukraine, but but a lot of refugees from the Middle East or in Africa or South Asia would cross the Mediterranean Sea into Greece or Italy, and challenging the capacity for Europe to take in all these refugees. But actually, in reality, if you look at the numbers, you will realize that it is the developing countries that are hosting a majority of the refugees in the world, and the least developed countries actually provide asylum to 27% of this total population. Yes, next slide, please. And just one more statistic to show you is that the ratio between the host population and the refugee population. So these are some of the highest ones in the world. In Aruba, it's 1 in 6, Lebanon, Curacao, Jordan, and Turkey. And if you're wondering where Aruba and Curacao is, which I was, there are the 2 island nations that you will see on the map that I've circled here, just north of Venezuela, that are hosting, a large numbers of Venezuelan refugees today. Next slide, please. And so in terms of the Ukraine crisis, the latest figures that we have is that there are 8 million internally displaced Ukrainians within their own country. And then as of a few days ago, there are more than 6.5 million Ukrainian refugees who have been registered to have crossed the border. So, these figures are really very high. Next slide, please. And so I'll just want to bring out this quote from our High Commissioner on the crisis. He says that the international response to people fleeing war in Ukraine has been overwhelmingly positive. Compassion is alive, and we need a similar mobilization for all crises around the world. But ultimately, humanitarian aid is a palliative, not a cure. To reverse this trend, the only answer is peace and stability so that innocent people are not forced to gamble between acute danger at home or precarious flight and exile. So what's important here is that, there are a few things and many themes that come out of this, but kind of remembering it's been very good to see such a positive response to the Ukrainian crisis, from what's been so tragic and all of these stories that we hear from the media. And, it's so encouraging to see so many neighboring countries in Ukraine, for example, in Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova, taking in refugees, and in Western Europe as well. And so, it's important for us to also offer this compassion to other refugees, regardless of who is seeking asylum. We should offer that same level of compassion. And another thing is that ultimately, for refugee responses, it's only a humanitarian solution. It's only looking at the symptoms of an issue. Ultimately, what is important is to address the root causes of why people are fleeing, including war and conflict, right? Next slide, please. And so one thing to also remember is that one challenge that we're facing globally is in terms of finding permanent solutions for refugees worldwide. This is a staggering statistic, but 2/3 of refugees live in a protracted situation. That means that it's a very prolonged situation for over 5 years, but actually the average is 20 years that they have to be a refugee before they can find a permanent solution to them. So whether a permanent solution can mean local integration into their host country, or being able to safely return to their home country, or being resettled to a third country. But the average length of refugees that they have to spend in camps is 17 years. So you can, in some places, you'll see generations and generations of refugees just growing up in these camps without access to a lot of opportunities. And what UNHCR and other NGOs we advocate for is for them to locally integrate into urban areas of the host country in order to have more dignified ways of living. Next slide, please. And so, but one thing that I wanted to also emphasize is that refugees are very resilient, right? And they're very self-reliant in trying to find their own solutions to issues. And, you know, they find hope and opportunities, even the most difficult of circumstances. They carry their children and their family, and they take in a lot of, you know, risk in trying to find shelter, livelihood, and safety for them. And they also, like us, have needs and have dreams. And so I wanted to show this very short video. It's on the Kenya's Kakuma camp. So one of the refugee camps that actually started in 1992 and still exists today. But it features some of the youth living in these camps and, you know, some of the talents and dreams that they have.
The youth who are here in the camp, they are the next generation, and we can do something in future, and we are capable of it.
There's a lot here that's like basically buried. If you uncover it, the world doesn't know what's coming.
Here in camp, we're only preparing ourselves for the future, to meet what's coming ahead of us as better people of tomorrow.
Everybody needs to know that Kakuma's got talent. Kakuma has been here since 1992. Today we are talking of over 180,000 refugees from 19 different nationalities. They have talents, they have skills, and the only difference between anybody out there and them is that they had to cross a border running for their dear lives.
The talent is awesome. The amazing thing here is that the mix of cultures makes it all the richer. I think they have the potential to take the world.
Kakuma Got Talent is just that loud voice that invites everybody out there to know that in this dusty place, in this hot place, in this place of refuge, there are people who have talent. All they are looking for is an opportunity.
My talent is dance, and dance is the most thing that I love. I feel something so very fantastic in my life, even in my body.
Most people believe that everything belongs to boys, even dancing. We decided that this year we have to show them what a man can do, a woman can do, not even better, best.
I was started singing in 2016. When I sing, I feel so good. I write my songs and my message is all about peace.
The judges will select the winners. They are going to get various awards so that they can use their win as a launch pad, albeit locally, for what they want to do.
These competitions, it means a lot to me. It brings about all the communities. It's great about link with the other people, other tribe. To participate, to show your culture, show your talents is the best thing.
We felt so good. We felt even like heroes on the stage. The music was flowing with us. We felt like, wow, this chance we're never going to miss it ever again. This is our day.
Yeah, so, you know, I just found that video to be quite touching in terms of, you know, people still living their lives and, you know, finding hope and opportunity despite the situation and the difficult circumstances that they face. So I'll also give an overview of the refugee protection in Hong Kong and what we do here. Next slide, please. And so the UNHCR sub-office in Hong Kong covers Hong Kong and Macau, and it was established in the 1970s to cope with the Vietnamese boat people crisis. As you know, in Hong Kong, we have actually a long history of displacement that, you know, we don't always talk about so much now, but with the waves of the Chinese refugees in the 50s, the Vietnamese in the 70s, and now as well today here in Hong Kong. And so initially the UNHCR was established in Hong Kong to deal with the Vietnamese boat people crisis. And in the past, we've formally also assisted with identifying refugees and providing assistance to both asylum seekers and refugees, right? So what I mentioned earlier, the difference between the category of an asylum seeker are those who are here wanting and in need of refugee, to be recognized as refugee in order to get refugee protection. So UNHCR assisted with what's called a refugee status determination. So they go through this process where you show your evidence, you have to give a testimony of what happened in your home country and why you have to flee. There are a number of different grounds under the Refugee Convention of why someone might not be able to return to their home country. So for example, on grounds of fear of persecution based on their religion, their political opinion, their nationality, or their ethnicity, for example. So UNHCR assisted with this process and also provided assistance to this population. But since around 8 years ago in 2014, the Hong Kong government has now established a unified screening mechanism that was introduced. So now the government is in charge of this screening process in recognizing refugees in what they call non-refoulement protection, so not being able to send back to their home country. And so UNHCR has transitioned more into an advisory and capacity building role in supporting the government in this process. Next slide, please. And so, but a caveat to that is that because Hong Kong is currently not signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, that means that if the government recognized that they deserve protection and they cannot send them back to their home country, these cases are then referred to UNHCR in order for us to seek a permanent solution for refugees here, right? So that could mean third country resettlement into places like Canada or the US. And so the people of concern of UNHCR at the moment is around 291. And these are, mandated refugees. And on the right, you can see the different countries that they might be from: Somalia, Yemen, Rwanda, Sri Lanka, Burundi, Pakistan, etc. You see this long list here. And what you'll notice here as well, that might be interesting for you, is that Hong Kong's refugee population is incredibly diverse, right? Compared to some of the other countries that I've shown just now, where a lot of them flee cross-border to neighboring countries, because Hong Kong, a lot of these refugees might come through by plane or, different means of transport, but we have a very diverse population here. And this is actually 291 is a small percentage of kind of the bigger population of asylum seekers in Hong Kong, which we call the USM population, the Unified Screening Mechanism population, so around 14,000 in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. And so what UNHCR does in Hong Kong, we do a number of different things, but one is, as I mentioned, assisting the government in the implementation of the unified screening mechanism. And so that might include capacity building and training immigration officials on how to conduct the screening process and provide support as much as we can when it's needed. We do case reviews and quality assessments of the screening process. We also support civil society actors, right? There are a number of NGOs in Hong Kong that's providing very crucial support for refugees here. So that could be, for example, legal support, mental health support, welfare support. And so UNHCR facilitates, where appropriate, exchanges between these NGOs, and we also provide technical advice to them. And thirdly, we identify solutions for refugees. So as you might have seen in the video just now with the refugee camps, the average length for someone to be in a camp could go up to 17 years. It's the same in Hong Kong in terms of the length of process. Some of the refugees here, when they're waiting for a permanent solution, it can take a very long time as well, up to 10 to 15 years in Hong Kong as well. So when they're in Hong Kong, we encourage them to see if there are other ways where other than more traditional forms of solutions, such as third country resettlement, if say they can get a student visa or a work visa to go to another country instead, rather than from like a refugee quota. Or, we find, just find different ways for them to have a permanent solution. But at the same time, when they're in Hong Kong for such a long time, we try to provide different opportunities such as training or volunteering where appropriate, so that they can do something and make their lives meaningful here in Hong Kong as well. Finally, we support a lot of work in informing the public narrative, in raising awareness on issues of the challenges that refugees might face in Hong Kong. We work with academia on research and also uses traditional and social media to raise awareness of the situation both in Hong Kong and globally. Next slide, please. And yeah, so these are some of the comprehensive solutions that I mentioned. When refugees are here in Hong Kong, we try to provide training, education, or internships, volunteering, employment, or online activity, just different ways for them to, instead of when you're being in limbo, to provide more opportunities for them. And next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to end with a promotion of some of our upcoming events that we're very excited about, and I hope that you can join us. And they're like the QR codes there for you to find more information on. One is the 15th Charity Refugee Film Festival. This is something that UNHCR does every year, and we're featuring 4 different films on different topics on refugee issues around the world. It will be both online and also ticketing for cinemas in Hong Kong as well. And then secondly, we're also hosting, in collaboration with other NGOs in Hong Kong, Refugee Week. So there'll be a set of different celebrations in Hong Kong, including art exhibitions, poetry competition, performances, and just different very fun community-based activities. And a lot of the asylum seeker and refugee population will be joining these events as well. And it's an opportunity for you to meet some of them and to be able to speak to them and learn more about their lives in Hong Kong. So I hope that you can join us for that as well. So there's the Instagram account that you can access to find more details of the actual events. So I'll leave it there. And if anyone has any questions or comments, definitely please feel free.
Yeah, Helen, we have a chat in the chat room. We have a question.
What support does UNHCR need to serve the refugees? What support does UNHCR need? So we provide a lot of support to refugees, but we also rely on a lot of our partners in order to provide that support together, right, to serve refugees. So for example, we rely on the support of a lot of the private sector, actually, a lot of pro bono legal support from different law firms in Hong Kong that we work very closely with in order to support refugees. So for example, if you're recognized as a refugee in Hong Kong, you can actually apply to work and you can access this work permit, and you have to renew it once every 6 months. So a lot of the law firms in Hong Kong, they're trained to how to help refugees process this application. So that's one type of support. We rely on the private sector. We also encourage a lot of employers to also hire refugees, and because they have lots of talent and opportunities, it's good for them to have these opportunities as well. We rely on a lot of support from NGOs. Like I mentioned, a lot of the humanitarian assistance and the support are actually conducted by NGOs rather than UNHCR in Hong Kong. So, we heavily rely on that as well. Then I see another question. Is there anything else other than research and publicity that the university community could do or help to respond to the needs of refugees? Yes, definitely. We always need a lot of allies and supporters in order to tackle this issue together, right? So, I would really encourage you to think about what it is that you would like to share, or what type of skills or experiences that you have that can be that can help the refugees in Hong Kong. So a lot of NGOs, they have volunteering opportunities, whether that's say like English classes, computer classes, or, you know, cooking together, and whether that's humanitarian assistance, you know, that we always rely on, you know, a lot of volunteers. So that definitely, that's one way. But as you mentioned as well, publicity is very important. It's important for us to be talking about these issues and, you know, to shed a positive light, to have a better understanding of the situation here. So yeah, definitely, I welcome you to also reach out to us if you would like to, you know, find ways, and we can definitely have a discussion on, you know, what can be done.
Thank you very much, Helen. I think the information is very comprehensive and very impressive. I think your role helps a lot. As the HKBU is talking about the interdisciplinary study, I'm thinking that your role is really a very combining different discipline, just like the social work that you mentioned about the legal and also the education technology. So it's a good demonstrations on the interdisciplinary studies, so important. So thank you. How about we all give you a big hand, and thank you, Helen, for sharing today. Before we close the assembly, I have 4 announcements. First of all is the Founders Day Thanksgiving service that will be on June 8th. We will do the live streaming via the YouTube. Please stay tuned. And the second is the special prayer meeting. That is the event organized by the Chaplain's Office as well as the Christian Staff Fellowship. That will be held on June 6th, Monday. Please join us for the Zoom and to pray together. The third one is the Bible study. It is on the Bible study on the Gospel of Matthew. We have invited Dr. Karen Chen, our former HR director. Please mark the date because we have once for each month. So mark the date on your calendar. The last but not the least, we have the Herbarian Bottle Lamp Workshop that will be on June 24th. Please register for that because that will be a very enjoying experience. I have this for my own too. So it is a good experience. If you're interested in that, that will be first come, first serve. So remember to register through the QR code. If you have any information on the 3 or 4 events, please contact Winifred for more information. Once again, thank you for Helen for sharing that all the precious informations and her experience to us. And thank you for joining us this assembly. Have a good day and have a good mood. God bless.